September 1945. Luzon, the Philippines. The air smelled of rain and smoke and rusting metal. The war had ended a month ago, but no one seemed to have told the jungle. I could still hear gunfire in my dreams, still see flashes of light through the trees. When the surrender came, it didn't sound like victory. It sounded like a sigh, like a world too tired to keep fighting. My name is Aiko. I was 27, once a nurse's aide with the Imperial Army. Now I was just another prisoner, carrying my 6-year-old daughter on my back as we trudged down a muddy road toward an American camp. We had eaten leaves and boiled roots for days. The child's weight was light, too light, her ribs sharp against my spine. "Mama," she whispered. "When will the thunder stop?" She still called the airplanes thunder. I couldn't tell her that the thunder had already taken everything. The guards shouted in English. I didn't understand all the words, but I recognized the tone. Orders. Efficiency. Control. I expected cruelty. It was what we'd been told to expect. Americans are monsters, the officers had said. They will not see you as human. So when we reached the camp, I kept my eyes down. I bowed without being told. I said nothing. The Americans watched us file in. Mud-caked, barefoot, hollow. One soldier pointed toward a line of tents, women and children. He said, gesturing. Another tossed a can of water toward us. I caught it. Spilled half, drank the rest. My daughter watched, lips cracked. I handed it to her. She took a sip, then clutched the can to her chest as if afraid someone might take it back. Inside the tent, there were others. Japanese nurses, civilians, widows. No one spoke. We had all lost the same things. Husbands, homes, faith in the empire that had promised us honor. That night, I lay awake listening to the distant rumble of American trucks and the low murmur of guards. Rain tapped on the canvas like fingers on a drum. Diary entry, September 9th, 1945. They have not beaten us. They have not yelled. They gave us blankets and food. I do not understand this kind of power. The next morning, the Americans lined us up again. We received a ladle of rice, watery soup, and something called spam. It glistened pink in the sunlight, smelling of salt and smoke. Some women refused to eat it, muttering that it might be poisoned. I didn't care. I took a bite. It was warm. It was food. Then, from across the yard, I saw something that made me freeze. A group of American soldiers had gathered near the fence. One crouched down and spoke softly to a Filipino child through the wire. The boy laughed. The soldier reached into his pocket and pulled out something small and shiny. Candy. The child reached eagerly. The wrapper crinkled, bright as gold in the dust. My daughter tugged at my sleeve. "Mama, what is that?" she whispered. "Is it medicine?" "No," I said. "It's something better." A few hours later, an American approached our tent. He was young, barely more than a boy. His helmet hung loose on his head, and his uniform was stained from the road. He carried a box of supplies, handing out tins and gauze. When he reached me, he paused. His eyes flicked to my daughter, who clung to my skirt, staring at his pockets. He smiled, a small, tired smile, and knelt down. "Hey there, little one," he said in slow English. Then from his breast pocket, he pulled out a small rectangle wrapped in silver paper. Chocolate. I froze. My heart hammered. I thought it must be a trick. Nothing came without punishment. I stepped in front of her. "No," I said in broken English. She cannot." He looked at me, puzzled. "It's okay," he said softly. "It's just candy." The words sounded simple, but they didn't fit any world I knew. For a long moment, no one moved. Then my daughter peeked out from behind my leg. The soldier smiled again and held out his hand. "Here," he said. "Sweet, for you." She hesitated, then reached out her small fingers. The chocolate melted slightly in the heat. She sniffed it, then took a cautious bite. Her eyes widened. A sound escaped her mouth. Not a sob, not quite laughter, something in between. She held the rest out to me. "Mama," she whispered. "It's like a dream." The soldier chuckled. "See? Not poison." He winked, then stood and walked off, leaving a small trail of footprints in the dust. I stood there, stunned. My daughter licked her fingers, eyes bright for the first time since the war began. I didn't know whether to cry or fall to my knees. Diary entry, September 10th. An American gave my child candy. I wanted to scream, to refuse it, to protect her from humiliation, but it was only kindness. I do not remember the last time I saw kindness without a flag on it. Days passed. The Americans treated us with a strange patience. They built a small kitchen, assigned doctors, even allowed the older children to play outside the fence under guard. My daughter ran barefoot through the mud, chasing a ball that one of the soldiers had made from cloth and string. Her laughter was awkward at first, as if she'd forgotten how to make the sound. At night, the women whispered. Some still believed this was manipulation, that the Americans wanted us to trust them so they could break us later, but I had watched their faces. There was no hatred there, only exhaustion, and something else I didn't recognize. Pity. One evening, the same soldier who'd given her candy stopped by the tent. "Aiko?" he said, mangling my name slightly. "How's the little one?" "She is better," I said carefully. "She smiles now." He nodded. "Good." He hesitated, then handed me a folded paper. "News," he said. I opened it. It was a translated notice. Japan surrenders unconditionally. Reconstruction to begin. I didn't understand the politics, only the finality. The empire was gone. The cause we'd been told was holy had dissolved into ink. I felt strangely light, and yet unbearably hollow. When he left, I looked at the sky through the torn flap of the tent. The stars were bright, scattered like tiny shards of forgiveness. My daughter slept beside me, her hand still curled around a candy wrapper she'd kept as treasure. I whispered into the night, not sure to whom. If mercy can come from an enemy, perhaps the world can still be healed. And for the first time since the war began, I dared to believe that tomorrow might not hurt as much as yesterday. If this story touched you, subscribe, like, and leave a comment, so we can keep these forgotten human stories of World War II alive, one voice at a time. October 1945. Luzon, the Philippines. The monsoon rains came early that year. Our camp sank into mud, the ground swallowing footprints and tents alike. The smell of damp canvas mixed with kerosene and smoke from the cooking fires. We had grown used to it, the scent of survival. By then, I knew the rhythms of captivity. Dawn roll call, ration line, work duty, curfew. We were not beaten, not starved. It was a strange kind of imprisonment, one that fed our bodies but unsettled our minds. Every act of kindness felt like an interrogation of everything we had been taught. My daughter, Yumi, no longer clung to me every hour. She spent her mornings playing near the fence with the Filipino children who came to trade fruit for tin cups or bits of soap. The American guards watched but did not interfere. Sometimes one of them tossed a ball or waved. One morning, I saw her sitting cross-legged in the dirt beside a young soldier, the same one who had given her the chocolate. His name was Corporal Andrews, though I did not learn it until later. He was showing her how to fold paper into a bird. The white sheet fluttered between their fingers like something alive. He caught my gaze, stood quickly, and saluted in an awkward gesture of apology. I bowed in return without thinking. It was the first time I had bowed to an American without fear. That afternoon, one of the officers called for volunteers to help in the infirmary. "Nurses, assistants, anyone with training," the interpreter said in halting Japanese. I stepped forward before I had time to hesitate. I needed something to fill the endless hours besides waiting and remembering. The infirmary was a tent lined with cots, its air thick with disinfectant and humidity. There were Japanese prisoners, Filipino laborers, and even a few wounded Americans, men recovering from jungle infections, not battles. Pain did not speak any language I didn't already know. The American doctor, Captain Reynolds, studied me for a long moment. "You worked in a field hospital?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. My English was rusty, formal. He nodded. "Then help me keep them clean and breathing. That's all that matters now." And so I worked. I changed bandages, measured fevers, mixed medicine I couldn't read. Sometimes in the background the radio played swing music, bright, careless tunes that made the wounded men stare at the ceiling and smile faintly. During a break, I noticed a soldier watching me. "You know," he said, "you don't have to bow every time someone talks to you. It is respect," I answered. He smiled. Then I should bow too. And he did. Right there among the cots, making the others laugh. It was absurd. And disarming. Diary entry, October 9th, 1945. They trust me with medicine, with life. I do not know if they understand what this means, to be given responsibility instead of punishment. Perhaps this is the first time I have felt useful without fear. Each evening, when I returned to the tent, Yumi would be waiting. She had made friends, a Filipino girl named Rosa, and 2 American soldiers who taught them both simple English words: apple, sun, peace, peace. The word felt heavy on my tongue, as if it still needed translation. Sometimes Corporal Andrews visited the infirmary. He carried boxes of medical gauze, but I suspected he came to see Yumi's mother, the woman who still bowed too deeply and spoke too quietly. "How's the little one?" he would ask. "She laughs more," I said one day. "That's good," he replied. "Kids should laugh. Makes the world less broken." He told me about his own sister back in Ohio, the same age as Yumi. "She eats candy every day," he said with a grin. "Spoiled rotten. Maybe Yumi can be spoiled too," I said. He shook his head gently. "No, she's earned her sweetness." The sentence hit me harder than he intended. Earned her sweetness. My daughter, born under the Empire's shadow, had survived starvation and bombs. Now she was being taught that sweetness was something she could simply have, not something she had to deserve through suffering. That night, I watched her sleep, a faint smile still on her face. The candy wrapper she kept from that first day was tucked under her pillow, smoothed and folded like a prayer. A few weeks later, the Americans began preparing to transfer some of us north for repatriation. Home, they said. But what did home mean when home was rubble? Japan was no longer the empire we had served. It was a wounded child, and we were its ghosts. Still, I helped the doctor pack supplies. "You'll be going soon," he said. "You'll be safe there." "I am safe here," I said quietly. He looked at me for a moment. "Then you'll take that with you." That evening, as the sun set behind the palm trees, the camp gathered for a small ceremony. It was not official, not in any record. The Americans had set up a gramophone, and music drifted through the humid air. Something slow and gentle. Soldiers and prisoners stood together, silent, listening. No flags, no orders. Just the sound of rain beginning again. Yumi tugged my hand. "Mama," she said, "will they come with us?" "No," I said. "They have their own homes, but they are kind," she said. "Why are they not our people?" I had no answer. I only knelt, holding her close. "Kindness doesn't belong to one side," I said finally. "It belongs to whoever remembers it." Diary entry, October 22nd, 1945. If the war taught us anything, it is that mercy travels faster than hate, even across wire. A few days later, Corporal Andrews brought Yumi a small cloth doll sewn from scraps of his uniform. Its eyes were buttons, uneven and kind. "For the trip home," he said. "She will treasure it," I told him. He smiled. "I will too." When the trucks came to take us away, the rain had stopped. The air was bright and raw. The soldiers lined the road, not as guards, but as witnesses. Some waved. Andrews stood among them, hands shoved in his pockets. Yumi leaned out of the truck window, clutching the doll. "Candyman!" she shouted in English. He laughed, surprised, and raised his hand in salute. The engine roared. The camp faded behind the dust. I didn't cry until much later, when the horizon blurred and the jungle turned into sky, because only then did I realize that in a war built on cruelty, the smallest kindness, a piece of candy, a paper bird, a name remembered, had the power to rewrite everything we believed about enemies. And that was when I finally let myself believe that peace was not a word, it was an act. December 1945, Yokohama, Japan. The ship docked under a gray sky that looked the same color as the water. The air smelled of salt, smoke, and something sour, like burned paper and rust. Yumi gripped my hand tightly as we stepped onto the pier with the other returning prisoners. American MPs guided us down a wooden ramp, their rifles slung low, their faces unreadable. We had left the camp in Luzon 2 weeks earlier aboard a crowded transport ship. The Americans had given us rations, blankets, even oranges. Yumi had eaten 3, juice running down her chin, laughing for the first time without restraint. "It tastes like sunshine," she said. I didn't tell her that in our homeland, the sun had burned entire cities. Now, standing in Yokohama, I hardly recognized the country I had left. The port was rubble. The city was a wound that had learned to stop bleeding. Charred skeletons of buildings rose like broken teeth against the horizon. The streets were silent except for the scrape of wooden sandals and the low murmur of survivors trading what little they had left. A Japanese officer, now wearing an armband instead of rank, handed out leaflets stamped with the chrysanthemum crest. Returnees are to report to local authorities for registration and resettlement. I didn't know where to go. The address of my husband's family in Tokyo no longer meant anything. Letters had stopped coming in 1944. Diary entry, December 3rd, 1945. We are home, but home has forgotten us. I carry a child and a piece of chocolate wrapper, both proof that kindness once existed. We found shelter in a half-burned schoolhouse turned relief center. The windows were patched with paper, the floor covered in straw mats. Yumi slept curled against my side, her rag doll pressed to her chest. Outside, the wind rattled loose boards like distant gunfire. In the mornings, I joined other women sweeping debris and sorting donated food from American ships. They called it Garioa Aid, though we didn't yet know what that meant. We lined up for powdered milk, rice, and sometimes small treasures, canned peaches, biscuits, hard candy. When the first bag of candy arrived, the children screamed with delight. Yumi stood still, staring at the familiar silver wrappers. I watched her fingers twitch before she reached for one. She unwrapped it slowly, reverently, as if peeling back a memory. She ate half, then handed me the rest. "Mama," she whispered. "It tastes the same." I nodded, unable to speak. The sweetness hurt more than hunger ever had. A few weeks later, I found work in a small field hospital outside Tokyo. The Americans had turned it over to Japanese staff under supervision. We treated malnutrition, burns, pneumonia, wounds of a nation learning to live again. I wore a borrowed uniform and a Red Cross badge that didn't quite hide the past. One afternoon, while cleaning an operating table, I heard someone behind me speaking English. Soft, careful words. I turned and froze. Corporal Andrews stood in the doorway, thinner, older, but unmistakably the same man who had given my daughter candy in Luzon. He wore a medical corps insignia now and carried a clipboard. When he saw me, he smiled in disbelief. "Aiko?" For a moment I couldn't breathe. "You," I said quietly. "You came here." "Transfer," he said. "Occupation duty." Small world, huh? His Japanese was better now, my English slightly less broken. We stood in awkward silence before I managed to bow. "You are alive." "So are you," he said. Then after a pause, "And the little one, she is here. She remembers you." He laughed softly. "The candy, right?" "Yes," I said. "She calls you the Candy Man." For a long time we said nothing else. The war had left too many words unspoken between people like us. But he began visiting the hospital more often, bringing supplies, checking on patients. We spoke of small things, food, the cold, how long it might take Japan to stand again. One evening I asked him, "Why did you give candy to the children that day?" He looked down, thinking, "Because when you feed someone sweet, they stop seeing you as a soldier. For a second, they just see a person." The simplicity of it broke something open in me. Diary entry, December 21st, 1945. He says kindness is the only weapon that never runs out of ammunition. I do not know if he believes it, but I want to. Winter deepened. Snow fell on the ruins like forgiveness that refused to melt. Yumi grew stronger, her cheeks no longer hollow. At night, she asked me to tell her stories. Not of the war, but of the camp. Of the American who had made paper birds and shared chocolate. She wanted to believe the world could be gentle. Sometimes, when I walked through the city, I saw American soldiers handing out supplies to orphans. The people bowed stiffly, accepting with shame and gratitude mixed together. A man beside me muttered, "They give us candy now. Soon they'll take our pride." I wanted to tell him that pride had already been consumed by fire, but I said nothing. By January 1946, the relief efforts spread. School children learned English songs. Newspapers printed photos of General MacArthur smiling beside Japanese officials. But beneath the surface, resentment smoldered. Some whispered that those of us who had survived as POWs were tainted. that we had been too comfortable with the enemy. One morning, as I hung laundry outside the hospital, an older nurse confronted me. "You worked for the Americans," she said. "You smiled at them. Don't forget who bombed our cities." I held her gaze. "I don't forget," I said softly. "But I also remember who fed my child." She turned away, muttering, "Shame has many flavors." That night, I wrote in my diary, "If mercy has a cost, I will pay it. I will pay it with every breath that keeps my daughter laughing." In February, Andrews returned to say goodbye. His unit was being sent home. He handed Yumi a tin of hard candy and me a folded photograph, him standing beside a group of nurses in Manila, all smiling despite the ruins behind them. On the back he'd written, "Sweetness is never lost, it just waits to be remembered." I didn't cry when he left. Not because I was strong, but because some tears are meant to be saved for quieter days. When spring came, the cherry trees bloomed in uneven bursts, half branches dead, half alive. People gathered under them anyway, eating rice balls, pretending there was no war-shaped hole beneath their feet. I sat with Yumi, watching petals fall into her hair. She held a piece of candy in her hand, still wrapped. "Mama?" she asked. "Should I eat it?" I smiled. "No," I said. "Keep it. It's proof that kindness can survive even war." Diary entry, March 29th, 1946. The Americans gave us candy. We gave them forgiveness. Both melt slowly. Tokyo, 1948. 3 years had passed since the surrender, and still the city smelled of charcoal and rain. The ruins had begun to vanish, replaced by wooden frames and scaffolding. Where bombed-out shells once stood, children now played among piles of bricks. Their laughter rose through the narrow streets like smoke from a new kind of fire, one that warmed instead of burned. I was 30, Yumi 9. We lived in a small room above a clinic where I worked as a nurse. The walls were thin, the roof leaked, but we had light, food, and quiet. On clear days, I could see Mount Fuji faint in the distance, like a promise. I had stopped counting the years since the camp. Yet sometimes, in the scent of rain on tin roofs, I would hear echoes, the rattle of trucks, the rustle of canvas, the sound of an American voice saying, "It's just candy." Yumi still kept the photograph Corporal Andrews had given us. She had folded the edges so carefully that the crease lines formed a frame. "He looks kind," her school friends would say when they saw it. "Did he save you?" I always answered, "No. He reminded me I was human." Diary entry, March 8th, 1948. Kindness is a small language, but it travels farther than flags. Post-war Japan was rebuilding itself out of dust and discipline. Food was still rationed, but the black markets buzzed with life. We learned to make do, diluting miso soup, sewing old clothes into new shapes. The clinic treated the same illnesses every day: malnutrition, fever, grief. We called grief the invisible sickness. One afternoon, an American officer arrived to deliver medicine for the Red Cross. He spoke in formal Japanese, crisp and polite, but when he switched to English to check his papers, the sound of it, the tone, sent a shock through me. The same accent, the same rhythm. I stepped closer. "Excuse me," I said in English. "Were you ever in Luzon?" He looked up, surprised. His eyes softened as he studied my face. "You're Aiko," he said slowly, as if testing the memory. "And Yumi. She must be grown now." It was him. Corporal Andrews, older, broader in the shoulders, his hair touched with gray. For a moment I couldn't speak. Then Yumi appeared in the doorway, carrying a tray of bandages. He froze, smiling as if he'd seen a ghost he'd been waiting for. "You kept growing," he said softly. Yumi tilted her head, uncertain. "Are you the candy man?" He laughed. A deep, startled laugh. "I guess I am." We shared tea in the courtyard behind the clinic. He told us he had left the army but stayed with the Occupation Administration as a medical liaison. "I couldn't go home," he said. "Not yet. Too much of me stayed here." He asked about Japan, about how people were surviving. I told him of the hunger, the slow rebuilding, the new schools. He listened quietly, his hands folded around the teacup as if it were something precious. "It's strange," he said, "how peace feels heavier than war." "Yes," I said. "War gave us orders. Peace gives us choices." Diary entry, March 11th, 1948. He looks at this city as if forgiveness were a structure that can be built with wood and nails. Perhaps it can. In the weeks that followed, he visited often. Sometimes with supplies, sometimes just to help carry crates. The other nurses whispered, curious about the foreigner who greeted everyone with the same small bow he had learned from me years ago. Yumi adored him. He brought her English books, Alice in Wonderland, Charlotte's Web, and taught her to pronounce the words slowly, carefully, as if building bridges one syllable at a time. One evening, I found him repairing the hinge on our door. "You don't have to," I said. He smiled. "After what this country's been through, every door deserves to open properly." He told me he planned to return to the United States soon. Reconstruction's ending. They won't need me much longer. He looked out at the sunset over the rooftops. "Do you ever think about leaving?" "Sometimes," I said. "But this is where Yumi will grow. This is where mercy happened to us." He nodded. "Then it's a good place to stay." That night, Yumi asked, "Will the candy man leave again?" "Yes," I said softly. "But kindness doesn't leave. It stays in the things we do." Before he left, he brought one last gift. A small tin box wrapped in cloth. Inside were pieces of American candy, peppermints, chocolate squares, and a note written in Japanese. "For the next hungry child you meet." He bowed. "It's time I let go of what you already learned." I handed him something in return. The doll he had made from his uniform years ago, its button eyes still uneven. "She's been loved enough," I said. He hesitated, then accepted it, his eyes glistening. "Then maybe she can remind me too." He left the next morning. The sound of his boots on the stone steps faded into the hum of the waking city. Diary entry, March 28th, 1948. He returned what war had stolen. Gentleness. The world spins slowly back toward grace. Spring arrived early. The cherry blossoms bloomed across Tokyo, filling the air with pink dust and the scent of renewal. The clinic's children gathered beneath the trees, paper kites fluttering like prayers. Yumi distributed the last of the candy from the tin, one piece to each child. When she reached the end of the line, she held one sweet in her palm. The final piece. "Mama," she said. "Who should get the last one?" I looked at the faces around us. Orphans, laborers, widows, all survivors. "No one," I said. "Keep it. It's not to eat. It's to remember." She nodded solemnly, wrapped the candy back in its silver foil, and slipped it into her pocket. That night, as lanterns flickered in the alleyways and the air hummed with the sound of rebuilding, I wrote my final entry. A soldier once shared candy with my daughter when the world had ended. I thought it was pity. It was faith that sweetness could survive the bitterness of war. I will teach Yumi that kindness is not weakness. It is what remains when nations vanish. And someday, when another child reaches for mercy, she will know what to give. Outside, the wind stirred the blossoms loose. They fell across the clinic roof like snow. The world was still scarred, still uncertain, but it was breathing again. And for the first time, I understood what true freedom tasted like. It was sweet. If this story moved you, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment, so the quiet voices of history are never forgotten, and mercy remains stronger than war.